Hey y'all, I'm Michael Richard, and today we're going to talk about the basics of seed starting. So when you're starting seeds, the first thing that you want to look at is the back of the seed packet that you have. The back of the seed packet has general information on how you start that specific seed. So it'll have information on the time of year that you should start that seed. So generally referring to the temperature that you have outside. It's usually talking about starting before or after the last frost date and the general temperature you need outside for germination to occur. Um, it'll tell you about the planting depth, so that's how deeply you'll actually place the seed in the soil. Plant spacing, so that's how closely together you'll plant seeds, or how you'll thin them out once those seedlings germinate. Another easy way to tell how to plant your seed is by using the internet or by just looking at the seed. So generally, lettuce are cool weather plants, and a squash is either a summer or a cold weather plant. There's either a summer squash or a winter squash. You can usually tell this by the names. Like I said, you can also use Google to find out the specific seeding instructions. But let's say you have a bag that has no seeding instructions on it. Maybe it doesn't even have a name. You can just identify the seeds by looking at them. So right here we have some lettuce seeds, which are pretty tiny. And here we have some squash seeds. These are spaghetti squash. And you can see there's a clear difference in size. And that size is going to help us determine how we plant our seeds. So generally speaking, a seed should go 2 to 3 times its length into the soil. So that means if your seed is very tiny like lettuce, it's going to barely get put into the soil. If it's a thicker, longer, bigger seed like a bean or a squash like this, it's probably going to get pushed a little bit deeper. As a general rule, you don't really want to go more than 3/4 of an inch into the soil. I generally stick around about 1/2 inch, and for some super small seeds, I'll do some surface sowing, and we'll get into that in a second. So now we're going to demonstrate how you plant a larger seed like a squash seed. So when you're planting a squash seed, as you can see, it's pretty large. So there's a couple of different ways that you can place it into the soil. You can put it and push it down into the soil like that. You can make a small indentation into the soil. I like to use the line on my pinky as a good indicator of the depth that I'm going. Or you can use something like a gardening knife, which already has measurements on it. Or you can make yourself an indicator like a stick, or even use a ruler that already has measurements on it that you can use to stick in the soil and make sure that you're planting at an accurate depth. But like I said, I just use the line on my finger. I make a little indentation. I'm working with wet soil already. It's very important to always work with wet soil when you're planting your seeds. Covering it up and patting the soil on it firmly, and then I'll give it another water and it's good to go. When we're doing smaller seeds like lettuces or different brassicas, sometimes you want to surface sow them. So when you surface sow, it's literally what it sounds like. Basically creating a nice seed bed right here, loosening up the soil. You take a little bit of the seeds and you plant them right on there. Some people like to press the seeds into the soil and then water them in. I like to take a little bit of extra soil, sprinkle it on top, and then water it in. Some people will even make a row, sprinkle the seeds in, and then gently cover the seeds back up with the dirt that was moved from the row. So when you start to seed in pots, one of the first things you need to get is your pot, and you want to get some good soil. So you can either use a pre-made potting soil mix that you get from a big box store or another gardening store, or you can make your own at home. Here at Recirculating Farms, we like to make our own. Ours is a mixture of compost, perlite, and either peat moss or coco coir, whichever one we can get our hands on. We prefer to use coco coir because it's a more sustainable option than peat moss. You should really try to stray away from peat moss as much as possible. Coco coir is also better for the pH in your soil. So the soil texture that you want is for it to hold its structure but also still be crumbly, as you can see here. So when we give it a nice squeeze, it holds itself together, but if we give it a tap, it breaks apart. So this ensures that it will hold moisture and nutrients, but it won't dry out on us too quickly, and it won't become compacted, which will make it extremely hard for the seedlings to burst through the soil and for the roots to break down into the soil. So first, you want to fill up your pot. You don't want to overfill your pot. And you also want to make sure that there's not too many large pieces inside of your soil from your compost, such as rocks, wood debris, or any food scraps or anything that haven't fully broken down yet. And when you fill up your pot, you want to stop right here at this little lip or ledge that's made inside of the pot. This indentation is the fill line. The reason you don't want to go over this fill line is because you can have issues where your seed will flood out of the pot, or you might even have soil starting to flood and erode out of the pot that way. So this is just a good baseline for you to have it at. So before you start seeding, whether that's direct seeding into the soil or seeding into a pot, you always want to start with wet soil. The reason you want to do this is because watering beforehand helps limit the compaction and helps increase the soil to seed contact. So right now we're about to demonstrate how you can direct seed into a bed. Right here we have some pine mulch. To direct seed into mulch, you want to clear a little space where your seed is going to go. So here we've made a nice little circle where our squash seed is going to go. We've watered and we've loosened up the soil. You always want to have loose soil when you're direct seeding into a bed, and we'll show you how to prep that bed on bare soil in a second. But right here we cleared out our mulch. We have a nice loose bed, as you can see. And now we're going to make our indentation for our seed. We'll put it in there, and we're going to leave it just like that. So after you put your seed in the ground or in the pot, make sure that you water it again so you can get that good seed to soil contact, knock out any air pockets, and ensure germination. So when you're putting small seeds into a mulched bed already, you want to make sure that you clear a spot out for the seeds to go into because they don't have the strength to push through the mulch as they germinate. So here in the pine straw, we're going to create a small space with our hands, make a little divot for our seeds to go into, put our seeds in there, and cover it up. Even though this doesn't look like a very large space, this is enough for the lettuce seedlings to push through because they'll have access to light and to clear airspace, and they won't have to push through the heavily mulched pine straw. You can also do this method by creating small furrows in the mulch. So you can clear out sections, have a section, create your line, create your row, and then put your seeds in there as well. Cover your seeds back up gently with some soil. Give them a nice pat, water them in, and then you can leave this space open and water them. Make sure you just water them thoroughly. The mulch will still help make sure that the soil around it doesn't dry out quickly, which will help ensure that your space where your seedlings are planted won't dry out as fast either. Think of it as like a towel or a sponge. You don't have the whole sponge just dry up the whole sponge dries up at once. It doesn't just dry up in splotches at a time, and that's because it's uniformly wet, and that's how you want to keep your bed. Same thing goes for planting any other type of brassicas or smaller seeds. This doesn't just go for lettuces. So before you start direct seeding into your beds, you have to prep your soil. So if you have some mulch, you want to rake that out of the way. Then you want to loosen up your soil so you're planting into a nice soft soil bed. You also want to remove any heavy pieces of debris that you might see. All right. Now after you've made yourself a nice clean soil bed, you're ready to plant. So when you're going to direct seed into a bed that has wood mulch, you want to clear the mulch off, create a space for your seed. So for instance here we have our squash seed. We're going to make a little indentation, put it in, cover it up, give it a nice pat, and then we'll water it in. For our lettuce seeds, we're going to do like we were doing earlier. We can make a row, sprinkle them in, or we can make a small indentation with our finger and sprinkle them in. And then we can cover it back up with the mulch, or we can leave this space open. I would recommend leaving this space open when planting smaller seeds, like your leafy greens, your different brassicas, and you can cover it back up with the mulch when you're using things that are a little larger, such as beans, squash, or melons, because those seeds have the strength to push through some of those wood pieces. That being said, you don't want very heavy wood pieces or even rocks or anything in the way because they will still cause the plant to use a lot of energy to push that material out of the way so it can finally sprout through and start getting some sunlight. Yeah, it's a good boy. You're so crazy.